boy at the forge. In the northern marches of the Iron Peaks, where the mountains stood stern and grey beneath the cold winds, there was in former days a fortress town called Stonegate. It was not counted among the great mansions of the dwarves, nor did kings sit there upon thrones of gold. Yet it was strong in its fashion, and dear to those who dwelt within it. For Stonegate was set upon the edge of the realm, watching the roads that came down from the north. Many roads met beneath its walls. Traders passed through its gates, messengers found shelter in its halls, and soldiers of the greater kingdom kept watch from its towers. It was a place of stone and iron, of smoke, labour, and long duty. Its folk were not rich, but they were proud, and though songs were seldom made of such towns, the safety of greater halls often rested upon them. Near the eastern gate, where the sound of marching feet was often heard, and where the wind carried the smell of pine and snow, stood the forge of Jorik the Smith. Jorik was no lord, nor of any royal house. He was a common dwarf, broad of hand and quiet of speech, but his work was trusted. The guards of Stonegate brought him their broken buckles, their axe heads, their mail, and their shields. He asked no praise for his labour, and gave none cheaply. His son was named Jofar. From his earliest years, Jofar worked beside him. He carried coal turned iron, swept the floor, and watched the colour of heated steel as other children watched the sky. Jorik taught him the craft of the forge, but he taught him more than craft. For Jorik held that iron was not the only thing shaped by fire. "If you only do what you can," he would say, "you will never become more than you are now." These words Jofar heard often, and at first he understood them only as the hard teaching of a stern father. When the hammer grew heavy in his hands, when the heat of the forge bit at his face, and when his arms shook from labour, Jorik did not always spare him. He was not cruel, but he believed comfort made poor iron and poorer dwarves. "The world has evil enough in it," Jorik would say. "A good dwarf must learn to stand between that evil and those who cannot stand alone." So Jofar grew under pressure. He became tall for a dwarf, though not beyond the measure of his kind, and strong in the shoulders. His hair was dark brown and worn long in his youth, and only a stubble of beard had begun to show upon his face in the final weeks of his 17th year. His eyes were grey, ash-grey, and those who later knew him said that even then they could grow hard enough to make a guilty dwarf look away. It was in those final weeks before his 18th year that the first grief of Jofar came upon him. For the orcs of the north, long driven into hidden places, gathered in secret and descended upon Stonegate. At first they came as raiders, or so the watch believed. But before dawn their full strength was seen. They fell upon the eastern gate with ladders, hooks, and black iron, and the horns of Stonegate sounded through the streets. The fighting was bitter. The guards held the wall as long as they could, and many brave dwarves fell upon the stones. Yet Stonegate was a fortress of the frontier, not a deep city of the old days, and the enemy had chosen their hour well. Before the sun stood high above the peaks, the eastern gate was broken. Then fire and battle entered Stonegate. Jorik's forge stood not far from the gate, and soon the war came to its very door. Seeing that the lower streets were failing, Jorik placed into Jofar's hands an axe they had restored together only days before. It was no ancient weapon of kings, nor did any song yet belong to it. It was a good axe, repaired by father and son, fitted once more for war. "Go," said Jorik. "Help the elders to the inner hall." Jofar did not wish to leave him, but Jorik gave him the look of a father whose command would not be argued with. So Jofar went, and with the axe in hand he helped lead the old and the wounded from the lower streets. But when he returned, the gate had fully fallen. Smoke filled the road. The cries of dwarves and orcs rang beneath the stone walls. There before the forge, Jofar saw his father struck down. The orc who had done it still stood above him. Then the first wrath of Jofar was kindled. He did not cry out. He did not call for aid. He came upon the orc with the axe of his father's forge and struck him down with a single blow. Those who saw it remembered the sound of it, for the axe bit deep, and the orc fell where it stood. But Jofar couldn't kneel beside Jorik. More enemies were coming. The battle had not passed, so he stood above his father, axe in hand, facing the street and the smoke, ready for whatever came next. Only once did he glance down. Jorik looked up at him and smiled. No last words passed between them. No blessing was spoken. No farewell was given. The war returned too swiftly. Orcs came again, and Jofar turned back to the fight. In that moment, the guards of Stonegate, who had fallen back from the lower streets, beheld a sight that would be remembered long after their own names were forgotten. A young dwarf standing before the forge, his father at his feet, smoke behind him, axe in hand, and death in his eyes. Then the reinforcements from the inner barracks arrived. The counterattack began. The dwarves of Stonegate, heartened and angered, drove the orcs back through the broken gate and out upon the road beyond the walls. When the battle ended, Stonegate still stood, but Jorik the Smith was dead. Some say Jofar did not speak for a long while after he learned it. Others say he returned to the forge that same evening and began putting out the fires with his own hands. Both tales may be true, for grief and duty were ever mingled in him from that day onward. Jofar inherited the forge before he came fully into manhood. Many thought it would fail. He was young, his father was gone, and Stonegate itself had wounds that would not quickly heal. Yet the forge did not fail. Through the years that followed, Jofar labored without complaint. He repaired the armor of the guards, often for less than was owed. He helped the widows of fallen soldiers when he could. He attended the memorials of the siege and did not forget the names of those who had died near the eastern gate. When craftsmen quarreled, he was often asked to speak between them. When younger dwarves lacked work, he gave them tasks. In time, as he neared his 22nd year, he took apprentices of his own, and the forge once more became a place of steady fire. It also became a place where guards liked to gather. Some came for repairs, some came because they had known Jorik, some came because Jofar was easy to speak with, though not always easy to impress. He listened more than he boasted, and when he did speak, his words tended to have weight. It was thus that Captain Darek first came to know him. Darek was an old captain of Stonegate, stern but fair, and grey had entered his beard long before Jofar took up the guard's shield. He had served through many winters, and had seen enough young dwarves mistake courage for noise. His men respected him. They did not scatter when he approached. They straightened. One day Darek came to Jorik's old forge and found several guards standing near the doorway, speaking with the young smith. Their voices quieted when he entered. "Captain," said one, bowing his head. Darek looked from one guard to another, and then to Jofar. "Is the gate now kept from this forge?" he asked. There were small smiles, but no mockery. Darek's men knew his manner. "No, sir," one guard answered. "Then why are my guards here in daylight?" "Repairs, sir," said another. Darek glanced at the swords and buckles already mended upon the bench. "Repairs do not usually require 4 tongues." At that, even Jofar smiled faintly. Darek's eyes settled on him. "And who are you?" Before Jofar answered, one of the older guards spoke. "This is Jofar, son of Jorik the Smith." Darek was silent a moment. "Jorik's boy?" "Aye, sir." Another guard added more softly. "They won from the siege." Darek's gaze sharpened. "The boy at the forge?" "Yes, sir," said the guard. "The one who stood when the lower street was lost." Darek looked back at his men with a dry expression. "When it was lost, was it?" The guard cleared his throat. "When it seemed lost, sir." For the first time, Darek smiled. After that day, Darek did not forget Jofar. He came more often to the forge, sometimes with work, sometimes with questions, and sometimes with no clear purpose that Jofar could see. He watched how Jofar dealt with apprentices, how he spoke to guards, how he carried the memory of his father without making a display of sorrow. Darek saw no hunger for glory in him. That interested him more than glory would have. Within 2 months, the old captain had made his decision. "You have learned how to make axes," Darek said one evening while the fires of the forge burned low. Jofar looked up from the anvil. Darek continued, "Now learn how to master one." So Jofar entered the Guard of Stonegate in his 22nd year. For 3 years, he trained beneath Darek. He learned shield work, patrol routes, formations, the weight of armor in rain, the patience required upon a cold wall, and the difference between bravery and command. Darek did not praise him often. When Jofar did well, he was given harder work. When he erred, Darek corrected him sharply and without cruelty. In those years, Jofar remained a smith, as well as a guardsman. His apprentices kept the forge when he was away, and often he returned from patrol to labor again beside the fire. Thus he learned what few captains learn early, that war is not won only with courage, but with supply, repair, discipline, trust, and tired hands that do their work when no one is singing of them. His first true command came in Ashwood. Ashwood lay south of Stonegate, beneath the lower slopes of the Iron Peaks. In elder days it had been burned in battle, and though the forest had grown again, it was never as it had been before. Birch trees stood pale among the older pines, and in autumn their yellow leaves covered the ground until the whole wood seemed touched by ash and gold. It was in the autumn of Jofar's 25th year that Darek led a company of young guards through Ashwood after a day of training near the lake beyond the trees. They were tired but in good spirits. Some spoke of food waiting in Stonegate. Others joked quietly as dwarves do when work is done and danger seems far away. Then an arrow struck Darek. It came from the trees without warning. The old captain staggered and fell to one knee. A second arrow flew. Then cries rose from the wood, harsh and cruel, and orc scouts poured from among the birches. The company was young. Few had seen true battle. Some reached for shields, some froze. Some looked to Darek, but Darek had fallen, and no order came. Then Jofar's voice rang out across the road. "Shields!" The word cut through the panic. Again he shouted louder. "Shields to me!" The dwarves turned. Some obeyed at once, others because the first had obeyed. Jofar took Darek's shield, planted himself upon the forest road, and raised his axe. "Stand your ground, dwarves!" he roared. "Let these filth learn what dwarven might looks like." There are many songs that later change those words, making them grander or more polished, but the oldest account keeps them plain, and therefore they are believed. The dwarves formed around him. Jofar saw that the road narrowed between birch and stone, and he used it. He set shields across the path, placed spears behind them, and ordered the wounded dragged to the rear. The orcs had thought to scatter recruits. Instead, they struck a wall. Again and again they came, and again they were thrown back. Jofar did not fight as one seeking renown. He fought as one holding a door. His axe rose and fell, but his greater strength was in his voice. When a dwarf faltered, he called him by name. When the line bent, he drove it straight. When fear returned, he crushed it beneath command. By the time help arrived from Stonegate, the ambush had failed. Captain Darek still breathed, though faintly, and the road through Ashwood was strewn with orc dead. Many dwarves had wounds that day, and some did not return. Yet the company had not broken. Afterward, when the tale spread through Stonegate, some spoke of Jofar's strength, others spoke of his courage, but the wiser dwarves spoke of something greater. For at 17 he had stood his ground. At 25 others stood because of him. And from that day the name of Jofar, son of Jorik, began to pass beyond the forge, beyond the gate, and beyond the walls of the small fortress where he had been born. The bear had not yet been named, but those who had eyes to see knew that he had begun to wake.